Shalom, this is Yehudah Glick from the Shalom Jerusalem Foundation here in Jerusalem. Today I have a very, very close friend whom I really admire for what he's been doing for, I believe, 15 years or even more.
16 now,
16
yeah.
years.
It's getting...
Joshua Reinstein. We will be talking with Josh a little bit about the developments in the Middle East in the past few years, including those that are happening this day, today. We're also going to be talking about the book, his book, which is being launched today, Titus, Trump, and the Triumph of Israel. We will be talking about this book. But before we talk about that, just a few updates from Jerusalem. We're in the process of Let the Shofar Blow in Zion. We are facing Rosh Hashanah, the first day of the 7th month, the Yom Teruah, which will be blowing the shofar worldwide. And we're going to be calling the world this year to blow under the slogan of Let the Shofar Blow in Zion, following the words of Prophet Joel, an unprecedented crisis in the world. In his times it was the locust. Today it's the COVID-19, and we're going to be blowing the shofar. We did an event on Mount of Olives 2 weeks ago. We did an event at the Tribes Gate, and today, September 1st, we will be blowing the shofar at the Golden Gate, the Gate of Mercy, where many Jews throughout history, many believing people throughout history, prayed, and wanted to see the shofar of redemption. We hope to be able to blow the shofar on Temple Mount in Zion. We're also following the historical events that are accompanying us these days. Yesterday, leadership of Israel, United States of America, and the United Arab Emirates flying from Israel to Abu Dhabi and hosting for the first time publicly an Israeli delegation. So these are very important, definitely those of you who follow the Shalom Jerusalem Foundation, these are definitely things that we see through the biblical lens as prophecy unfolding in front of our eyes. So we will be talking about all of this, and thank you for following what's going on here and being part of this unbelievable godly era that we're living in. So, without further ado, I want to go directly to Josh Reinstein. You are the director of the Knesset Christian Allies Caucus, but you're a young, good Jewish boy born in Dallas, or lived your life in Dallas. How did you get to dealing with Christian supporters of Israel, and how did you get to the Christian world?
Well, I realized in 2004 when we started the Knesset Christian Allies Caucus that it was Christians, not countries, that were standing with Israel. And together with a member of Knesset named Yuri Stern, Alav Shalom, we decided to launch the Knesset Christian Allies Caucus as a way to see how we can build a new relationship between Jews and Christians in the 21st century.
Before we get to 204, tell me a little bit about your background. You grew up as
So I grew up as a Bible-believing Jew. I was born in Toronto, Canada. I moved to Dallas, Texas when I was 1.5 years old. I grew up in Dallas. Spent 9 years then afterwards in Toronto and made Aliyah in '99.
So you made Aliyah from Toronto?
I made Aliyah from Toronto.
So why did I think you were from Dallas all your life?
I lived 12 years in Dallas, and I grew up in Dallas. And
you made Aliyah at 21 years old?
I made Aliyah at 22.
22. On your own?
Yeah, I was a Chayal Boded. I made Aliyah because I wanted to join the military. I was a tank gunner in the 188.
You decided to make Aliyah on your own? You wanted to join the Israeli IDF?
Absolutely, that was the plan all along. I came from, I was the grandchild of Holocaust survivors. I knew it was very important to have your own country, to be able to defend yourselves, and I always wanted to be a soldier. You have to understand, in like the late 70s, early 80s in the United States, every Jewish person had one of two heroes. It was either Sandy Koufax, who didn't play in the World Series on Yom Kippur, or Ariel Sharon, as Menachem Begin said, the greatest general since Alexander. I was an Ariel Sharon guy until he decided to change sides on us. But I was always an Ariel Sharon guy, and it was always my dream to join the IDF. And I was able to do that after finishing my university studies. So I joined at the age of 23 in 2000.
What did your family, your parents think about this idea?
They weren't too excited about me joining the military. I think they were supportive of the fact that I wanted to make Aliyah, but they were scared, like all Jewish parents.
You joined the military understanding that you're finished, you're making Aliyah?
I already made Aliyah, and then I had to volunteer to the military because I was already too old to be inducted. I was 22 years old. So I had to volunteer to the military after making Aliyah. It wasn't a popular decision in my family. There was a lot of angst about the decision, but I knew that...
Aliyah or about joining the military?
About joining the military. Aliyah, I think most of my family understand that. They were all Zionists. They all understood that eventually. I talked about this since I was 13, so they all knew I was going to Israel. But I think it was hard on them, the idea that I volunteered to the military even though I didn't have to go. But for me, it was important to do my service.
Why didn't they like the fact that you joined the Israeli military?
Well, you know, the perception of the military and of the IDF in the United States and Canada is one of something of extreme danger. And in fact, it turned out 6 days after I joined, the second Intifada broke out, and it was extremely dangerous. So I think they were just scared, like any Jewish parents would be.
Okay, you finished serving in the army. How long did you serve in the Israeli army?
I was there for a year and a half.
And then you go out to the world and what?
And then I said, okay, how can I better support Israel? How can I do things that help Israel? I wanted to be able to take the skills that I had and be an asset. And I realized that the two places where Israel needed the most help was in Hasbara, public advocacy, spokesperson work, and marketing. So I started working as a spokesperson for a political party for the city of Jerusalem, and I started working in marketing for high-tech companies and that as well. And that's what led me...
That's in the beginning of 2000. There weren't too many high-tech companies here in Israel at the time.
It was 2002. There were high-tech companies. The problem was that they were being bought out for pennies on the dollar, and no one knew they came from Israel. And the reason is because they weren't able to sell and market their products abroad in a way that people would understand. They can buy directly from the Israeli company. Israel's come a long way since then. But the idea was, when I started my marketing firm in 2004, was to take these companies and give them a voice abroad so they don't have to sell for cheap to American and European companies.
And then one day, two years later...
Okay, so now we're in 2003 actually. I'm working with Yuri Stern, Alav Shalom, as the spokesperson of the Israel Beitenu party. And my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, said to me that she has a friend who's a Christian, who's volunteering in Israel, and she's here without a visa, and they found out and they're giving her 48 hours to leave the country. And I said, that seems a little harsh, 48 hours. She was working, giving out, I think, food at a food bank. She had children, she had rent. It takes time to pack up. I understand she has to leave. You broke your visa, but that seems harsh. And my girlfriend at the time said, who's now my wife, Rebecca, said, well, who is she supposed to talk to? So I went to Yuri Stern, who was the head of the Internal Affairs Committee, and I said, who are these Bible-believing Christians who are standing with Israel? They're doing these good things, they're working for Israel, no one really talks to them, they have no way to address any of their concerns. We should do something in the Knesset that is kind of like a forum where we can work with these Christians and see how can we work together. Obviously they love us and they're supporting us. And he said something very interesting. He said that as a refusenik in the former Soviet Union, it was Christians who was smuggling in and out the information that they needed under the horrible oppression of Soviet Union, obviously. And these Christians were captured and sent to Siberia, sometimes never heard from again. So he said their Christian love of Israel is a real thing. And we need to do things to try to cultivate that. But it would never work in the Knesset. So I said, why wouldn't it work in the Knesset? He said, well, look, politically it's not a popular idea. The religious are against working with Christians because of missionary work. The secular people don't want to work with Christians because they want a separation of church and state. The left don't like it because they think they're too right-wing. The right-wing are worried that they pigeonhole them as being too right-wing. So everyone would have a problem. So I asked if I found a solution to all these problems, can we start something to do this?
Okay, and what was the solution?
Well, I stole the idea from the US model of a caucus. And the Christian Allies Caucus is actually the first caucus ever established in the state of Israel. All the other parliamentary groups were lobbies until then. The caucus, and what makes a difference, is that it's just members of parliament who can sit in a caucus. So there's no outside pressure telling them what to do or asking them to do. It's just a bunch of members of Knesset sitting on a specific issue. And this issue is, how do we work with our Christian allies?
So the goal is to work with Christians, or the goal is to promote things together?
The goal is to build direct lines of communication and cooperation with our Christian allies around the world in order to take their biblical support and turn it into real political action. So and this is what we call faith-based diplomacy.
So you're actually taking biblical faith, turning into diplomacy, because the Knesset is not a religious institution, it's a state institution.
Yeah, our bottom line, our product in the end is what we call faith-based diplomacy. It's political support based on biblical support. And in the last 3.5 years under the Trump administration, we've seen the renaissance, the rebirth of faith-based diplomacy.
We're getting closer to the book now. So when you established it in 2004, what was your vision for 2020?
So I guess my vision would be more for 2010.
Okay.
And the vision is to find a way that we can really work together, Jews and Christians, and create, real initiatives together that we can work to get done. We were always a working caucus. We always wanted to have real results. My vision was basically the idea of the Republican Party, where the Republican Party base is Christian, and therefore their support of Israel. Why can't we create that in other places where there are Bible-believing Christians, and then see how we can work together?
And how many like those have been created until today?
Well, now you're jumping ahead of the story. So in 2006, we got a big break during the Second Lebanese War, when the Congress wanted to show that they're standing with Israel, and they launched our first sister caucus, the Congressional Israelist Caucus. Today, it's the only bipartisan caucus in the House of Representatives. It's a incredible stream of support from the House, Democrats, Republicans together.
And Republicans. It's not.
It's both, and all of our caucuses are multi-partisan or bipartisan because it's not just a partisan issue. This led to the establishment of many Israel Allies caucuses in countries around the world. Today we have 43 Israel Allies caucus. Our last one was launched just 2 weeks ago in Venezuela. So we have caucuses and parliaments that don't even have relations with Israel. We have over 1,000 members of parliament in our network, and this network of caucuses, 43 caucuses, is how we coordinate the activities of faith-based diplomacy through real legislations, resolutions, and hearings around the world.
Okay, so now I'm going to jump ahead because we don't have all day to be here today. and this book pretty much describes what happens in the caucus and your activity in the faith, what you call the faith-based diplomacy, in the past 3-4 years. Now,
no, not really. Basically, the book starts with Titus. He was not part of the caucus, thankfully. He was in charge of the second.
It's unbelievable. You see at the opening page of this book, they cover the book. There's the gate of Titus, which actually stands in Rome, with the hostages or the captives carrying the vessels out of Jerusalem and symbolizing the victory of Titus over the God of Israel. Not over Jerusalem, not over the people of Israel, over the God of Israel. And actually saying Israel is a nation of the past. We don't exist anymore. And Titus, we got some news for you.
Well, that's what the book's about. Basically, we start with Titus, who claims victory over the God of Israel. That's it. He won. He built this arch, as you mentioned. It sits in Rome. It was the first arch in war. Now you have the Arch of Triomphe in France. You have many arches. It was one of the biggest national infrastructure projects at the time. It cost tons of money to do it, but he was so excited that he beat the God of Israel that he had to erect this arch, and it depicts people carrying the menorah.
Now, just one thing. Titus built this gate here to emphasize, to show off, to demonstrate to the world, I, Titus, have managed to defeat the God of Israel. That means to defeat the Bible. That means to cancel the Bible. That means no more Bible. As a matter of fact, Titus, on the location of the temple, he places a house with a statue of one of the Hellenistic gods, and the Roman gods, but afterwards it becomes, but he actually points out, no more Israel. The people of Israel are never going to return back to Jerusalem.
All right, so obviously he was wrong. But why was he wrong? He was wrong because he didn't know about the Bible. He didn't know about the Prophet Bible. Anyone at the time, including Rabbi Akiva, and you know this, who knew the prophecies, knew that this was just the beginning of the fulfillment of prophecies, that one day we would return. And in fact, that we'd become a nation again, which happened in 1948, and all these prophecies were going to be fulfilled. But he didn't know that.
That's his big mistake. He didn't read the Bible.
And that is what the book's about. If you don't look at Israel through a biblical lens, you miss the story. You think maybe that this is happening, like Titus thought he beat the God of Israel, but really something else is happening. Now, because Bible-believing Christians do read the Bible, they're able to understand better than the political analysts and the politicians what's happening on the ground in Israel. Because if you can understand the Bible, then you understand the newspaper. And so the power of faith-based diplomacy is not just that Christians are getting involved and getting their representatives to act and create legislation. And I used the test case of Trump in the last 3.5 years where we've had the greatest success of faith-based diplomacy ever. The power is that Christians and Jews who read the Bible are able to understand Israel through a biblical lens, not just a political lens.
Let's dig in right now. You said right now, in the past 3.5 years, under the Trump administration, once again, I want to remind you, the caucus, the Christian Allies Caucus, connects with the House in Washington with all parties. Josh and the caucus are not promoting any one of the candidates today of the upcoming elections. What you are doing is talking what happened in the past 3 years.
Well, what we've seen the last 3 years, and let's go back to the fact that I'm the president of the Israelites Foundation. 1915, we come out with a list of the top 10 things that America could do for Israel.
2015.
2015.
Not 1915.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, that was way before my time. Now we're going back to the time. I look good for myself.
1915 was even before the Balfour Declaration.
2015, we come on a list with the top 10 things that America could do for Israel. Our goal as an organization, as the Israelites Foundation, is to accomplish one. Okay.
Remind again, the caucus wants to promote Israel.
Yeah.
Using Israel's friends around the world. So you put a list.
We put a list of our top 10 things in our wildest dreams. What could we do?
At least one will happen.
At least one we can get done in the next 5 years.
That would be a success.
Donald Trump in 3.5 years has done 9 of them.
9 of them.
9.
Give me 3, 4 examples of what the things include.
Moving the embassy to Jerusalem.
Moving the embassy to Jerusalem. Donald Trump read the Bible. Jerusalem is the capital of Israel, the capital of God, the capital of faith. It's the foundation of our faith in the world. So he moved the capital, the embassy to
scrapping the Iran deal.
3 years ago, nobody in the world believed that it
if we would have heard that that's the one thing we're going to get on our list, we would be jumping for it. We've been working on it for 14 years as an issue.
If you had to bet on those 10 things, which one of those things, moving the embassy to Israel would be a lower.
Look, it was our major issue. We worked on it for 14 years, and we would hope that that would be the issue. Probably not. Did it almost right away. Trashing the whole JCPOA deal with Iran. Which huge.
Was Obama's great claim to fame.
Guaranteeing Iran nuclear weapons within 10 years, giving them billions of dollars, releasing the sanctions, a nightmare for the Middle East, and he just scrapped it. He reintroduced the sanctions, a massive, massive victory. Sovereignty over the Golan Heights. I mean, I don't need to tell you that we've been working on that one for 40 years. That's a 40-year fight. Both parties, bipartisan, everyone's been talking about it, left, right, religious, secular, sovereignty, Golan Heights. He does it like that. People don't even really know he did it. A lot of people didn't even know that happened.
And there was no Third World War after he did that.
No. In fact, all these steps brought peace closer together, not farther away. And that's what...
That's maybe the biggest surprise. The biggest surprise of all these things that you're talking about, we were warned. I remember years ago when Bill Clinton, when the PLO had an office in Jerusalem, the Orient House.
Yeah.
And they warned us, if we close that down, there's going to be a Third World War. And look where we are. And now these are things that we were warned would lead to a Third World War.
World War III, Third Intifada, blood in the streets. If anyone even thought about doing it, much less doing it, even talked about doing it, people would die.
Josh, I asked you for 3 examples, but you're turning me on. So give me a few more.
Taylor Force Act. The making it that you can't give the PA money as long as they're using that money to pay terrorists who are killing people. Seems common sense, but America was literally paying the PA to pay the terrorists that are killing their citizens. And everyone said there's no way we can't do that. The funding UNRWA. You know how big the funding UNRWA was.
Everybody here knows what UNRWA is. What is the official mission of UNRWA?
UNRWA is an organization that only deals in the UN with Palestinian refugees. All other refugees are under UNHCR. They have their own organization. Only Palestinian refugees get their...
What are they supposed to be doing with these Palestinians?
Well, first of all, they have 4 times the budget. So they have 4 times the budget just for Palestinians of all the Syrian refugees, Egyptian refugees. They have 4 times the budget. Their only agenda is to perpetuate the refugee problem. So even though refugees by definition are only 1 generation, you can be 7th generation refugees. If you just looked at how many refugees would be left from 1948, there'd be 30,000.
Yeah. Beyond helping these refugees, what was UNRWA?
Oh, they were teaching hate and death, and their textbooks were saying we're going to wipe Israel off the map, and they were storing rockets in their schools to shoot on. I mean, a disaster. Everyone said there's nothing you can do. You take away money from UNRWA, it all collapses. Okay?
And
Donald Trump defunds UNRWA.
No U.S. dollar, not $1 bill going to UNRWA. So all these things take place here.
All these things happen. They happen so fast, and I go into in the book Titus, Trump, and the Triumph of Israel. All 9 of them, they happen so fast. Some people don't even know they happened.
You said in the Knesset, let's have a session in honor of Trump because he did this. No, let's have a session in honor of this.
So it's not that I'm saying, you know, I'm Republican, I'm Democrat. I'm saying this is a fact. He did all these things, and they all said that this is going to lead to death and destruction, except for people who read the Bible. In fact, people who read the Bible thought these were really smart things. We've been working on these things for many years because we know that until you face the truth in the Middle East, until you do what's biblically correct and not politically correct, you're not going to have peace. We've divided the land of Israel 22 times since 1911. It led to only death and destruction. Why? It's the wrong prescription for the disease.
So actually, what you're doing here, you're actually promoting the Bible here. That's what you're telling. You're telling guys, you want to understand what's going on in the Middle East?
I think what God is promoting the Bible. God is showing everyone, if you follow the Bible, peace. You don't follow the Bible, war. The only ones who are picking up on this are Jews who read the Bible and Christians. Because of that, and because they're so engaged, they've been able to get these ideas across to the Trump administration.
But now, Josh, we're seeing something happening in the Muslim world.
But it's all connected. It's all connected. The results of all these 9 things that I went out, the results of this push by Christians as faith-based diplomacy is the peace agreement that you just saw with the United Arab Emirates. Because, as you know, when you're strong in the Middle East, you can get anything. You can have it all.
So I want to ask you a question. You know, the relationship between Jews and Christians throughout history was not of the best. As we know, we have some very, very painful issues. We'll have to understand maybe how can it be that Christians that read the Bible are against Israel, but we'll talk that in a second. But there's been a change, and we see hundreds of millions of Christians who are supporting Israel today. If I talked to anybody 5 years ago to listen, you know, there's going to be Muslims supporting Israel, and it would sound far-fetched. Is there a possibility that we're seeing today a new era of Muslims beginning to support Israel? Will we have a caucus of Muslims supporting Israel in the Knesset in the near future?
It really depends on what happens with faith-based diplomacy. Now, as long as we continue on these ideas of strengthening Israel, that Israel's the solution in the Middle East, that democracy and freedom is the solution, then people will come on board, like the United Arab Emirates.
I know that 2 years ago there was a big delegation of evangelical pastors from America who went to meet in the Gulf countries. They met with the leaders of Bahrain and then Dubai and Abu Dhabi, and I'm sure they have some. They're part of the blame for this peace agreement that we're seeing right now in front of our eyes. But the Muslims will accept these biblical claims that Israel is a chosen nation by God?
Look, the way that God does things is not always through the biblical verse. It's through actions of people, all right? And when you strengthen Israel, what we've seen is the Netanyahu-Trump doctrine of peace through strength, then people understand that we're here to stay, that we're here for a reason, that we have things to offer. And then they get attracted to it.
Mystical things. It doesn't follow the Bible and you're going to be saved. What you're saying is that people don't understand that Israel is here for good. People think that, you know, Israel is like a temporary issue. There were the Crusaders.
No, but it's both. It's when you follow the Bible and you strengthen Israel because of that, and you do what's biblically correct and want politically correct, then it affects all types of support for Israel. Political support, legal support, everything. When Israel's strong, we can get anything. We can get sovereignty. We can get peace deals with the Arab, but when we're weak, when we're giving land for peace, when we're releasing 1,000 terrorists with blood on their hands for one prisoner, when we're doing all that, then we get nothing. It all goes down. So the more you follow God's prescription for the Middle East, the more you understand the fulfillment of biblical prophecy and go in that line, the better life is going to be in all facets of life. The less you do that, the worse life is going to be in all facets of life. And that's really where it all comes to. That's why I wrote the book.
So I want to say, how do you explain the phenomena of Christians that don't support Israel?
So I put a lot of time in the book, Titus, Trump, and the Triumph of Israel, into speaking about that. There's actually a whole chapter.
I apologize, I only got the book today. It was only launched today.
It only came out today. He got one of the first copies.
The book can be bought on Amazon. Though it's been sold out, the first edition, but it's coming out already, and you can go onto Amazon to get your copy. But you're dealing with the question of Christian countries that don't support Israel?
So you have to understand, this book is the culmination of the last 16 years of my work. And what I try to do is a one-stop shop to answer all the questions I've been getting along the way. You know, how does faith-based diplomacy work? But I also get a lot of Jews say, well, why do some Christians support us and some Christians don't? I also get Christians saying, well, why do some Jews want to work with us and some just, shun us? Okay. So I go into those aspects as well. And one of the big points is that mainline Christian churches who believe in replacement theology, they believe that they replace Israel, that the covenant between Abraham and the God of Israel is over now, that Jerusalem was a great place one time, but now they have Rome, they don't need Jerusalem. Those people are actually more likely to be against Israel because
those
it follows...
Those are actually Titus people.
Those are Titus people. Yeah.
So Titus believed that he overcame Israel.
Yeah.
And the Christians that don't support Israel are those that believe that they're overcoming.
They're now Israel.
But
the Christians that believe they're grafted into the covenant of Israel and part of this covenant, those are the ones that are standing with Israel. Now, in 1948, there weren't many like that. There were only 6 million. But because of the success of Israel, that population has grown. There's now over 600 million evangelical Bible-believing Christians, and those are the people who are standing with Israel. And as Israel succeeds, that stream of Christianity is succeeding.
So now, let me ask you a different question. What do you answer the Jews that tell you, listen, Josh, they're pulling your leg. These evangelics are supporting Israel, but actually they're waiting for it all to come, and they're ready for them to take over, or for some kind of Armageddon, or some kind of and you're supporting the Satan. You're supporting these Christians.
Well, I think I would just quote at the time the Speaker of the Knesset, Rabbi Rivlin, who said, we both have disagreements of what's going to happen when Messiah comes. We think he's coming for the first time, you for the second. But let's agree to work on everything until that point, and then we'll see who's right. I'm not worried about that because I believe in Judaism, and I believe that our version of Messiah is what's happening. Okay? So I'm not trying to say that I believe in the Christian version of Messiah. I don't know how comfortable Christians would be with what Jews believe is going to happen when the Messiah comes as well. But we both have the same roots. We both have so much in common that we can work together. And look, the proof is success. It works.
Okay. So there's one thing I definitely agree with most of what you said, except where I truly believe that the God of Israel will be announced in Jerusalem as the God of all nations.
Yeah.
Temple Mount, all my activities is faced in the Shalom Jerusalem Foundation towards recognition of Hashem by all nations, not only Christians. And in my eyes, the breakthrough that we are seeing now in the United Arab Emirates or in the Gulf is a major breakthrough. And I know many Christians refer to Muslims as the Antichrist or as Satan, but my question is, do you share this feeling that we're going through a historical event, that seeing that flight fly, would you have joined the flight yesterday to Abu Dhabi together with Jared Kushner?
Look, it's a tremendous success, and you can't say that it's not. I mean,
what's a tremendous success?
The peace agreement is a tremendous success. It's a tremendous success because it proves once and for all that peace through strength works. It's the first time we've ever had peace for peace. It's a sea change in policy. Huge success for the Trump administration. Huge exchange for the Netanyahu.
The value that you're talking about, and I agree with 100%. Peace is you make peace. They used to say, peace you make with enemies. It's not true.
Yeah.
Peace you make with people who want to make peace with you.
Yeah, you make peace with people who want peace. You don't make peace with enemies.
Because people, if they're going to continue staying enemies, then it's not peace.
The big misunderstanding, I think, in Israel was they thought that the objective of war was peace. The objective of war is victory. With victory comes peace. So I think they miscalculated it all along. But again, this is a massive success. But I don't think I agree with you that this is the reawakening of the Muslim world coming back to God's ways. Because what brings Bible-believing Christians and Jews together is that shared belief in what we call the Tanakh and what they call the Old Testament. All right? As long as Muslims believe in the Quran, which has a different set of prophecies, different prophets, different God, as long as they believe in that, I don't see them being a part of this cooperation on biblical level. Now, what I do see as momentous is that by following the biblical mandate laid out for both Jews and Christians, we bring peace with everyone. It's not exclusive just Christians and Jews.
So, first of all, as I said, I don't know who Allah is, who that Allah is. My goal is that all people in the world should recognize the one and only God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God of Israel. And I think that first, I think the very fact that the world is becoming monotheistic is also a terrible, an unbelievable breakthrough, because in the time of the Bible, all nations were idol worshippers, and I want to remind you that all nations were idol worshippers, and the fact that there are people who are worshiping one God is a major thing that today it seems like quite obvious. Everybody knows there's one God. You believe, you don't believe in God. They don't say which God do you believe in, how many gods do you believe in. The question. So, but I specifically definitely feel that the Muslim world, you know, people are talking about the next countries that will join will be Saudi Arabia, will be Bahrain, etc. I was hoping more like Oman or even Indonesia.
Well, the next country that I believe, and I believe this is going to happen within the next 2-3 weeks, that will make a peace agreement with Israel is Sudan.
Sudan.
And I think where we agree on is
Sudan
that
is a Muslim country?
It's a Muslim country in Africa.
So it's not an Arab country, it's a Muslim country.
It's a Muslim country, and it's been very antagonistic toward Israel.
We have a caucus in Sudan?
We will. We will soon. We have in South Sudan, but we will soon in Sudan, as soon as we make peace.
How many caucuses do you have in Africa, by the way?
10.
10 already in Africa?
We have 10 in Africa already, and we're just about to launch this week. This is an exclusive for the show in Madagascar. We'll be number 11.
Well, where are the big Nigeria?
Nigeria, Uganda, Kenya, Ghana, Malawi, Zambia, South Africa.
Malawi was just elected a president who said his success was because of his support of Israel.
Yeah.
And he is a Bible-believing pastor.
This is one of the great successes of faith-based diplomacy. We've been able to create a bloc of 10 Christian countries in Africa that are supportive of Israel. We even get votes in the UN now, which is unbelievable, never heard from before. Our prime minister in the last 2 years has visited Africa twice. No prime minister visited Africa for 50 years beforehand. So it's been very successful, and this is all another success of faith-based diplomacy.
Which one of the caucuses that was like the most, I would say, inspirational or really moving for you on your point of view?
You know, it's really hard to tell. I've been at almost all 43 launches in countries around the world, and each one is just unbelievable. You know, one that sticks out in my mind is Colombia. They brought 100,000 people to the streets with Israeli flags celebrating Israel. You know, and people, even the politicians were shocked.
You mentioned before that part of your identity becomes the fact that you're a descendant or a grandchild of a Holocaust survivor.
Yeah.
Your grandparents who were in the Holocaust can look at you and say, wow.
Look, for me, it's just this whole being in Israel is a wow. You know, like we just celebrated my son Avram's bar mitzvah last week, who is named after his grandfather who survived Auschwitz, Avram Reinstein. He's the first Reinstein that we know of to be born in Israel in 2,000 years in Jerusalem. I mean, it's really unbelievable. You know, I'm the first Reinstein that anyone in my family's ever heard of that served in the Israeli army. I mean, every day we're breaking new ground, and this is the answer to a 2,000-year-old dream.
The first Reinstein moving to Israel, Joshua, is like the first leader conquering Israel, Jericho, blowing the shofar, waiting for the walls to fall down. But really, again, I mean, neither of I don't mean to be a prophet, but how do you see the developments in the neighboring countries, and how will that have any kind of impression in what's going on to our nearby neighbors?
Here's the answer. This story, our past, our present, our future, has been foretold. And I take great solace in the fact that there will be peace in Jerusalem, like I know you do. The question always is, are we going to go the hard way or the easy way? We've always gone the hard way, all right? And we're at the fork in the road right now. If we continue down the path that we're on now, it will be a very easy way. We'll declare sovereignty in Judea and Samaria. We'll continue to make peace agreements with our neighbors. We'll develop the country. We'll build out. We'll be strong, we'll be powerful, and we'll have God as our center, centering us.
God says.
But
anybody who blesses Israel does not only mean bless, I bless you. Anybody who cooperates with Israel will only benefit from the cooperation with Israel.
But I think that this presidential election is very, very important. And there's another road, and we've gone down that road too during the Obama administration. And that's the road of, you know, releasing terrorists and making deals and giving land and, you know, saying we're going to keep this little block and just leave us alone. And it's the weak way. And that weak way is a very dangerous, scary road that we've been down for the last 20 years. I would hate to turn back the clock and go back down there
what
again.
What you're saying is right now we have to continue on the road of strength. We have to continue on the road of faith, and this is what faith-based diplomacy is all about.
Absolutely.
The idea of don't go in the path of Titus, go in the path that Trump chose, which means the path of not giving in to terror.
The main idea is, Yehudah, is that when Christians take action and get involved, big things happen. And when they sit at home and they pray about it and they think about it, but they don't take any action, nothing happens.
And the only difference between us is you're only doing with Christians, and I want all. I'm not giving up on anybody. I want the Chinese also. I want the Muslims also. I want everybody believing in.
You're good enough to work with everyone. I'm focusing on working with Christians and Jewish relations, and I got my work cut out for me. We're seeing a lot of success.
So your family that didn't like the fact that you joined the military, have they changed their overview?
Yeah, I think the minute I got out of my military service and I was pretty much without a scratch, I think they were very proud and very happy. And now my generation of Reinsteins, my sister, my brother, they all live in Israel. We still can't get the parents over, but we're working on that. But all the next generations are born in Israel. My niece just joined the army in Renana.
Another thing I admitted, when I went on my last visit to Dallas, everybody in the streets, they know two major Israeli figures. There's like Benjamin Netanyahu, Prime Minister, and Josh Reinstein. Everybody I bumped into, they all say, "Oh, Josh Reinstein, Josh Reinstein."
That's a lot to do with my mother living in Dallas. She does a very good job of talking about me all the time. So yeah, I have to give her credit for that.
To be proud of him. I'm to be proud of him.
Thank you.
It was really wonderful having you here with us, and I think that living in Israel in these days is in itself, you have to be pretty blind if you don't realize that we're living through biblical times. And right before we conclude and once again call upon our viewers to buy the book on Amazon, I want to. What do you think is like the newest thing that here appears in this book that you won't find in any other book, or anything that you believe?
I think that probably the most controversial thing is at the end of the book, where I say that the success of Donald Trump in the elections will not be determined on what happens with coronavirus, but rather sovereignty. I believe that if Donald Trump says that Israel is in charge of sovereignty, they can decide their own fate before the elections, I believe that he'll win in an unbelievable victory. And I believe that if he continues to say that, sovereignty, we don't want sovereignty and things like that, I think it will hurt him with his base. I don't think he'll lose. I still think he has a shot, but it won't be an outstanding victory like I believe will happen. His base will rally to that message, and I think he knows his base, and I think we'll get that surprise message before the elections.
So thank you so much, Josh, for joining us. And once again, before we conclude, I want to invite you all to the global shofar blowing in the weeks between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur around the world, uniting around the one and only God, because there is one and only God, the God of Israel. You can go into shalomjerusalem.org and learn more about the Let the Shofar Blow in Zion, on Zion, and once again, follow the word of Hashem and get your copy of Josh Reinstein's book. Shalom from Jerusalem. Shalom, Josh.
Thank you, Yehudah. Always great to be on the show.